CEO, took me to lunch just to fire me, but he had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead. Before I start, let me ask you something most people don't dare to admit out loud. Have you ever sensed the moment something in your life was about to change? Before anyone said a word, a shift in the air, a glance that lingered just a second too long, a silence that suddenly meant everything. That's how I knew. The lunch wasn't about gratitude or celebration. It was a setup. And by the time the coffee arrived, I had already seen it coming. My name's Derek. I'm 42, and for the last 11 years, I've been the man behind the curtain at Riverton Manufacturing. Not the one giving speeches or shaking hands with investors. No, I was the one who made sure our systems didn't crash when a factory ran 24/7 during a winter storm in Saskatchewan. The guy who kept 3 production facilities humming through blackouts, cyber threats, and clueless consultants. But no one ever puts that on a plaque, do they? It was a Wednesday, cold, one of those February afternoons in Toronto, where the wind pushes through your coat like it owns you. Preston, our CEO, had invited me to Maxwell's. That's the kind of restaurant where you order something French, even if you don't know how to pronounce it. The kind of place that makes firing someone look elegant. He didn't even touch his wine, just smiled and said, "We're going in a different direction." Like I was a misplaced logo or a headline they needed to edit. I smiled, said I understood. That's business, right? But inside, I felt the cold settle deeper. You don't give a man 6 weeks to transition gracefully unless you've already written the script. What Preston didn't know was that I'd read this story before. I knew every beat, and I had already started drafting my own ending. Back at the office, my access had already been downgraded. My name was gone from the leadership mailing list. Someone had been busy. Funny thing is, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I just felt emptied. 11 years of problem solving, of skipped holidays, of waking up at 3 a.m. to fix a server glitch before it hit production, erased in a single meal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the look on Preston's face. Polished, rehearsed. But behind it, a flicker of relief. Like he'd been nervous I'd cause a scene. Like he hadn't expected me to walk away quietly. And that's when the real feeling hit me. Not sadness, not betrayal, but clarity. I remembered what I saw in the logs 3 months earlier. IP activity from the executive floor. Someone snooping through my files, accessing protocols they had no business touching. They weren't just replacing me. They were copying me, downloading everything before cutting the cord. That's when I knew. They thought I was just another replaceable cog, but I wasn't, and they were about to find out. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I had made 3 decisions. First, I was going to protect what was mine. Second, I was going to make sure no one ever did this to someone like me again. And third, I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. So let me ask you. Now, have you ever been underestimated so badly? It became your greatest advantage, because that's where my story begins. And if you've ever been pushed aside by someone who never built what you did, you're going to want to hear what happened next. The next morning, I showed up to the office like it was any other Thursday, coffee in hand, parked in my usual spot. even nodded to the security guard, who didn't quite meet my eyes. Word spreads fast in places like Riverton. People knew, or at least they sensed it. I could feel it in the elevator, the quiet shuffle, the way conversations cut off just a second too soon. I sat down at my desk and logged in. My credentials still worked for now, but a few tools I'd built were already grayed out. Access under review. That's what the automated banner said. I didn't panic, didn't flinch. I'd been expecting it. It was all part of the choreography. But here's what they didn't understand. Systems are only as good as the people who know how to make them dance. Around 10 to 45, I got a visitor, Nathan Blake, Harrison Wells' nephew, the MIT wonderkin with a shiny resume and even shinier shoes. He stood in the doorway like he was the new sheriff in town, looked up from my screen and raised an eyebrow. Looking for something. Just getting a feel for the layout, he said, like the server room was a piece of art he was about to critique. Preston said you'd be showing me around. I leaned back in my chair. He did he? Nathan didn't even pause. Just strolled in and started eyeing the equipment. Nice setup, he muttered. Little old school, but solid. He said it like it was a compliment. I nodded once, then let the silence sit there long enough to make him glance up. You know, he added, your documentation is really thorough. I've been going through your protocols. Got some ideas for modernization. Of course he did. He left a few minutes later, still smug, still clueless. And that's when I opened the access logs, confirmed what I suspected. Nathan's admin credentials had been created 3 weeks ago, long before the lunch. He'd already been through my documentation, my scripts, even my custom tools. They hadn't brought him in to learn. They brought him in to take. That night I called Luis, one of my best, sharp as hell. We'd spent years building this system together, him and me and Vanessa. I asked him to meet me the next morning. Joe's Diner, East Side, 6:30. It was still dark when I pulled into the lot. Inside, Luis sat at a booth with 2 coffees already on the table. He looked tired, not just from work, but from knowing what was coming and not knowing what to do about it. They're phasing me out, I said plainly. No need for drama, just the truth. He nodded. I figured. Nathan's been asking questions, weird ones, like if your systems are really necessary, or if they're just complicated for no reason. I laughed, but it wasn't from humor. He's trying to rewrite the map without understanding the terrain. Luis looked down. I'm sorry, man. I should have told you. You've got kids, I said. I get it. He hesitated. What's your plan? That's when it clicked. I hadn't known until that moment. But sitting there watching steam curl off a chipped white mug, I felt something settle in my chest. Steady, final. They think the system is the documentation, I said. But it isn't. The real value that lives up here. I tapped my temple. Luis didn't say anything, just nodded. I need you to help me copy everything I personally developed, I said. The stuff that's not part of the standard builds. And I need to know who's still loyal. He sat back, thought it through. Vanessa. Probably. Maybe Sean from infrastructure. Claire from DevOps, too. I nodded. It was a start. We finished our coffee in silence. Back at the office, the building felt colder. Not the temperature, just the mood. Preston was traveling, HR was unavailable, And Nathan was sitting in what used to be my meeting armchair, talking strategy like he had built something worth protecting. The team looked confused, split between loyalty and fear. I didn't blame them. I'd felt that same fear once. That afternoon, I walked past the server racks. The humming, the soft blinking lights, the quiet rhythm of order. 11 years of my life still breathing in copper and code. I ran my hand down one of the panels. Not yet, I whispered. You're not done. Because here's the thing about systems built on sweat patience and quiet mastery. They don't collapse overnight. But the men who ignore their architects, sometimes they do. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. All hands meeting. Preston at the front of the room. Nathan standing slightly behind him, hands folded like a kid at his first recital. The conference room was too bright, too clean. Fluorescent light bouncing off glass walls and nervous faces. Preston cleared his throat. As many of you know, he began. We're entering an exciting new phase. That's what they always say before they burn the house down. He kept talking. About agility, transformation, digital leadership. A dozen buzzwords that didn't mean anything to the people who actually kept the systems running. And then he said it. We're thrilled to announce that Nathan Blake will be stepping into the role of Director of Technology. He brings a fresh perspective, one we believe will take Riverton to the next level. There was a pause. The kind designed to feel respectful. And of course, he added, we want to recognize Derek Marshall for his years of invaluable service. He'll be working closely with Nathan over the next few weeks to ensure a seamless transition. Polite applause. A few heads turned toward me. Most didn't. Vanessa didn't clap. Luis didn't either. I gave a small nod. No smile. Just enough to say I heard you. When it ended, I went back to my desk, sat down, looked at the blinking cursor on the screen, then opened my contract. Section 14, Intellectual Property. I'd read it a dozen times already, but today I wasn't reading, I was hunting. It was all there. My rights, my tools, the pre-employment date on the Systems Sync Core framework. My digital footprint was clean. I'd built that system before I ever stepped foot in Riverton. Every update since modular outside standard working hours documented on my own Git server. They thought I didn't protect my work. They were wrong. Later that afternoon, Nathan called a meeting with the IT team. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway, quietly, sat in the back, just a shadow in the room. He stood at the front drawing diagrams on a whiteboard, talking about streamlining legacy systems, about shedding unnecessary complexity. Luis leaned toward me and whispered, he just erased our load balancing matrix. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because right then, Vanessa raised her hand. Sorry, Nathan, she said carefully. But those protocols aren't legacy. They're critical. You change them without adjusting the floor latency, you'll get cascading failures. Nathan blinked. A flicker of frustration crossed his face. Thanks, Vanessa, he said. But we're moving forward. The room went quiet. That evening, I stayed late. The building was empty, just the low hum of servers and my own breathing. I opened my backup logs, archived every build, every line of code, every time-stamped note from the last decade. copied it onto an encrypted drive, then shut down the terminal. Wasn't theft. It was protection, and I knew I'd need it soon. The next morning, an email from legal hit my inbox. Riverton asserts full ownership of System Sync and all derivative works. They offered me a $5,000 technology acquisition bonus. $5,000 for a system that ran 3 manufacturing floors, protected multi-million-dollar contracts, and saved their entire operation from collapse more than once. $5,000 to forget I'd ever existed. That's when I felt it. Not rage, not even sadness, just clarity. They didn't just want to replace me. They wanted everything except me. And if they were coming for what was mine, then I was going to make sure I came prepared. Not to fight, to outlast. Wednesday came quietly. No fireworks, no emails marked urgent, just silence. The kind that hums in your ears when something's about to go wrong. I spent the morning finalizing Nathan's transition documents, process maps, admin procedures, system sync flowcharts, all tidy, all professional, all incomplete. Because no matter how many diagrams I drew, I wasn't handing him the soul of what I built. That lived somewhere else, somewhere only I could access. Luis passed my desk around noon, slid a small flash drive across in a folded paper napkin. No words, just a nod. Everything I asked for was on it: deployment logs, version trees, authentication scripts, backdoors I'd created years ago, not to control, but to protect. I wasn't going to use them recklessly, but I needed leverage, just in case they forgot who kept the machine running. By afternoon, Vanessa was pacing outside my office. Nathan wants to meet. Now. I followed her down the corridor, passing a few wary glances from staff who still didn't know whether to treat me like a hero or a ghost. Inside the boardroom, Nathan stood at the head of the table. Preston was seated to his left, arms folded, face unreadable. Diane from HR was there too, typing like a courtroom stenographer. Nathan didn't wait. "We're moving your final day to this Friday." That was 2 weeks early. No lead up, no warning. Preston jumped in, his voice smooth, like always trying to sound reasonable. "We feel the transition is progressing ahead of schedule. Nathan's already adapted to the infrastructure. There's no reason to prolong." I smiled. "Just barely." "Of course," I said. "As long as you've reviewed the ownership clauses." Nathan looked confused. Diane looked annoyed. "I'm sorry," she asked. "The system you're transferring, System Sync, was licensed, not sold. Clause 7 in my original agreement. Riverton has rights to use, not own." She hesitated. "Preston didn't. Our legal team has interpreted the clause differently," he said. "Everything developed during employment belongs to the company. Except what was developed before employment," I corrected him, "and I have proof, including emails from Preston requesting the integration, not ownership." Preston's jaw tightened. Diane stopped typing. Nathan tried to break the tension. "Look," he said, "I just need to know everything's going to keep running." "It will," I replied, "for 8 more days." He blinked. "What?" "That's when the license expires." Preston stood up. "That's not funny, Derek. It's not a joke. You'll get an expiration message. Nothing will crash. But the system will pause until renewal terms are met. You're bluffing. I'm protecting my work." Silence fell over the room like a dropped curtain. Diane spoke first. What are your terms? Recognition of ownership, reasonable compensation, a clean exit, and an NDA that keeps this quiet for all our sakes. Preston shook his head. You're holding us hostage. No, I said calmly. I'm asking you to act like professionals. I stood, nodded once, then left. As I walked back to my office, I passed Nathan's team in the hallway. Some looked away. A few looked relieved. Because whether they'd admit it or not, they knew. The system wasn't theirs. It was mine. And in 8 days, they'd feel just how deep that truth ran. The day I left Riverton, I wore the same dark blue jacket I'd worn my first week on the job. Faded at the elbows now, but still held its shape kind of like me. No handshakes, no goodbye cake in the break room. Just a hollow good luck from Diane and Nathan pretending not to make eye contact as I signed the last piece of paperwork. I walked to my car with my box of things, 2 framed photos, a ceramic mug from a long-forgotten Christmas party, and a stack of hand-scribbled notes I couldn't bring myself to throw away. My phone buzzed. Luis. 1 word. They changed the passwords. I smiled to myself. It had begun. Friday slipped into Saturday, then Sunday, and then came Monday at 9:17 a.m., right when the machines on the production floor ramped up. System sync halted. Not crashed. Not destroyed. Just paused. A silent line in the code that read, "License expired. Please contact the developer to renew." By 9:20, line 1 shut down. By 9:45, the floor was quiet across all 3 facilities. By 10:30, Preston finally called. His voice was sharp, but shaking underneath. What the hell did you do? I leaned back in my chair at home, a coffee in hand, the window open to the sound of melting snow dripping from the eaves. I didn't do anything. I said calm as ever. The system license expired. Standard protocol. You can renew if you'd like. This is sabotage. This is licensing, I corrected. Check the original agreement. Clause 7. You've had 11 years. Silence. I've sent the renewal terms to legal. I continued. 3 things. Ownership acknowledgement, compensation, and a mutual NDA. Nothing excessive. You're blackmailing the company. I'm protecting what's mine. That night, they signed. 3 days later, I was sitting across from TechCore's VP of Operations. A clean, downtown office, sleek walls, quiet HVAC hum. We're still acquiring Riverton, he said. But we want you on our side. He slid the contract across the table. Consultant, not employee. Double my old salary. Remote first. Total autonomy. I read the offer in silence. And Nathan, I asked. The VP didn't flinch. He's transitioning to other opportunities. Of course he was. 2 weeks later, I heard Luis had been promoted. Vanessa joined my new consulting outfit by the end of the quarter. Then 3 more from my old team. It wasn't just a reunion. It was a rebuild. A better one. I didn't advertise what happened. Didn't post on LinkedIn. I just got to work. 1 night a year to the week, after my last day at Riverton, I was at a small lakeside cabin I'd bought with my first consulting check. Just a deck of dock and silence. The kind of quiet you earn. I watched the sky turn purple over the water, a bourbon in hand, when I got a message from Vanessa. A photo. Preston, sitting alone at a corner table in a downtown restaurant. No tie, no team, just him and an empty seat across the booth. He saw me, she wrote, nodded once, looked away. I stared at the image. He looked smaller somehow, tired, and I realized I didn't feel victorious. I just felt certain, certain that I'd done what I had to. Not for revenge, not for pride, but for the simple truth that too many companies forget you can't replace the foundation without risking the collapse of everything above it. I put down the phone. The water was still. The system was mine again, and this time no one would forget who built it.